Right. Excellent. So, as always, take your time and see the sort of process of warming up and getting into the session as much, if you like, a mind thing as a body thing. So, rubbing your hands together and tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder and your arms. The other side. The upper part of your chest. And your belly. And your legs. Sit back. Try not to see this quietening of your mind, this focusing of your attention as I suppose, as a chore. It's quite a difficult thing to do. We need to be sort of a bit patient, a bit gentle with ourselves as we start to do that. Just sort of, I've used this idea before of sort of herding your thoughts, as it were. So they will stray away, and that's just a natural human thing. We are thinking creatures. We're creatures who engage with our surroundings, so we will get drawn away. That shouldn't be seen as being a problem. The problem is when that actually becomes the norm, where we don't get that sense of coming back on a regular basis. So we're sort of stuck out there, as it were. So you can focus your attention on things like your weight sinking down, your hips sinking into the chair, maybe your breathing, feeling of releasing tightness from the whole of your body. You can focus on what they give you, this sense of a spacious quality within your body. Maybe feeling your breathing ease, maybe more aware of the chair that you're sitting on. And they're all things that we want to try and maintain an awareness of through the practice. So bringing your feet in. So one of the key things, of course, in Tai Chi that we also always go on about is the sinking the hips and so on and so forth. You can only really get to a point where that is something that happens reliably if you practice it. And you can only really retain the awareness of the feeling of your hips sinking if you practice it really on its own. One of the most common standing practices in Tai Chi is simply standing. So you could say that simply sitting and practicing bringing your attention back to hips, rooting down, posture for a period of maybe 10 or 15 minutes is actually a very valuable exercise because it does have an effect on the nervous system. It hardwires certain neural connections, which means that they're there for you. Think of it as constructing a pathway. If you have a shed in your garden and there's a path going down to it, and you very rarely walk down there, if you do decide to go down there, the path will be a bit overgrown, the door will probably stick, it'll be difficult to get into the shed, and so on and so forth. If you go down there every day, then it'll be a much smoother operation, and one which you can sort of rely upon more. So this aspect of what we might call sitting meditation is a very important element in the whole scope of the practice of Tai Chi. So give yourself a few moments in this position to remind yourself of the posture. Remember that in theory, something like dropping your hips should be quite simple. In fact, it's not something that should require any effort on our part. If you dropped a spoon, a bunch of keys, a pen, a piece of paper today, you'll be able to think back to that and realize just how easy it is to drop something. It's not difficult to drop something. So dropping our hips, in theory, is in the same category. Really what gets in the way are our habits of movement and standing, our posture, and that brings it back to our minds once again. So something that we're trying to do through that meditative element is to recognize and move away from the habits that cause us to lose that sense of rooting down and whatever else we're trying to do, and to develop new habits. And that development of new habits is very linked in with the focusing of your attention on a particular element. And then just turning your head. It's worth noting how many times you get distracted by a thought, by a noise outside, by an idea that crops up. It might be, oh, I want to talk to that person about that, or I need to do this, or whatever, planning, looking back at the conversation we had yesterday or whatever. All of those things are things that we can recognize and acknowledge and come back from to an awareness of the body. So we want to try and have that process running in the background, like these, you're watching on a digital device of some time. And actually, on those devices, there's any number of what they call background programs running that you don't even notice until they go wrong. And so we want things like rooting down to, if you like, run as a background process. And then going around with your elbows, loosening your shoulders. Going forwards. Hands out to your sides. Another idea that I sometimes give to people about things like rooting down, the alignment of our posture and so on and so forth, is that it's like wearing a pair of shoes. And we don't have to constantly think about whether those shoes are on our feet, whether the laces are tied up or the buckle's done up or whatever. But we would notice when they come untied, when they come loose. Or maybe even the chair that you're sitting on. Part of you is aware of the chair. So it seems obvious in a way, and yet we so easily lose that focus of our attention on things like our hips and so on. And then coming around. For me, this is one of the great benefits of Tai Chi, this greater sense of awareness of what is going on in and around your body. And then back the other way. I was very fortunate to do a couple of training weekends with somebody from Edinburgh who was a pathologist. He gave evidence in court, but he also taught things like human anatomy and physiology in evening classes. Just shake your hands, now go into the rocking movement. And it was quite interesting to hear him talk about that, because he was saying that very few adults really know that much about what's going on in their body. As children at school, we we learn a little bit about it. And if you choose to be a doctor or something like that, you obviously follow that up. But there's not that much opportunity in our culture for us to learn about this body that we actually have, and yet it's so vital. And it's a kind of indication of the sort of I won't say dismissiveness, but we overlook what's going on in our bodies very easily until they start to go wrong. But the awareness that we build with arts like Tai Chi actually means that we start to be much more in touch with our body and can actually work with what's happening. And turn not just the body, but also, if you like, the surrounding environment, the feel of the ground beneath your feet, feel of your hips on the chair. Be aware of the freshness of the in-breath. All these things that we sort of occasionally touch on in Tai Chi. Turn in the other direction. And then going around. There's a benefit there for our minds as well. Again, I mentioned it a number of times, the stillness, the spaciousness, that sense of just resting. Not having to pick up on the latest news bulletin or think about this or plan this. Nothing wrong with any of those, but there's the meditative element in Tai Chi offers a chance to sit back from that. And back the other way. And then pull the knee up, step out. A little bit of a push down into the ground. And then on the other side. Okay. Hands down to your sides. Trying to stay aware of the movement from moment to moment. The spaces between your arms and the side of your body opening out, closing in, the movement in your ribs, between your shoulder blades, the movement of your weight from hips to feet to hips. And the connection between those movements. So they're not separate, they're one thing. So from that point of resting, you're able to sort of look out over the landscape of your body. And change into parting the wild horse's mane. Each movement, each stage of each movement is different from the last one, from the last time you did it. There are always going to be little changes physically, in how your body's responding to the image, the ideas of the movements. flow of energy within your body, all constantly changing. And again, as though you're sitting beside a river, simply watching the water flow past and aware of all the patterns of light on the surface of the water, all the little eddies and swirls that the water makes, and the sounds, and so on and so forth. Coming over. Sun change to pigeon spreads its wings. And we can build on that awareness. We can bring images in and begin to develop these inner qualities of Tai Chi, the strength, the flow. So, imagine, for instance, that you've got a rubber ball here, a big ball like the kind you get in gyms, and as you go forwards, you're just squeezing almost like you're hugging the ball. And then as you go back, you're letting it expand more slowly. And notice how that just gradually begins to change all the way through your body, developing that more connected, more fluid, and that stronger quality. Remember, this is the inner strength of the Tai Chi. So much of that is led by our mind in one way or another. So much of that simply cannot happen unless the mind is trained. And then pushing a wave. Notice whether, as you go forward, your hips are coming off the chair. We want the opposite to happen. We want them to feel as though they're almost pulling us back, which they will start to do at a given point as you go forwards, helping to counterbalance the extension. And then sit back and a variation. Raise your heels, step forwards, turn slightly towards the foot, and push forwards. A little bit more movement. Sit back, raise your toes, bring your foot in, turn, raise the other heel. When you step out, put your heel down, lower your toes, and only then move your weight forwards. Sink back. So we want to distinguish between the different parts of the movement, but not lose the flow from one to another. This again is as much to do with your ability to let your attention flow from one moment to the next. Just one more time. And then both hands twisted. Try and get away from the idea that you can't do something. And particularly when we're thinking about things like the meditation and so on and so forth, so often people say, well, I can't do that. Well, to which my response is often, have you tried? These elements in Tai Chi, I think we should apply the idea of cultivation. So if you decide you're going to do some gardening and you dig a hole and you put put a seed in the hole and cover it over, and then you go back 10 minutes later and the plant hasn't started growing, you don't say to yourself, oh, I can't garden. You know it's going to take time. You need to be a little bit patient and continue to water and weed and so on and so forth. And in the same way, all of these qualities, and particularly these very subtle inner qualities of Tai Chi, are things that are cultivated over a period of time. Now go back to Pigeon Spreads Its Wings, 3-part sequence. Do one more round of this. And then winding your hands out. Remember, as though you're moving through water. So if you do this in a very stiff way, or if you simply move your arms, actually it would be hard work in water. You can move your whole body, and if you can move it with a sense of that softening, then you'll find that your arms slide through the resistance much more easily. Now, before we move on, just bring your hands in and rest. Give yourself a few moments in this sitting position once again, just to recenter, to quieten your thoughts, to draw your attention in a little. and then hands in front of you. A deliberate sense of expanding from the middle of your body, here, like a ball expanding, which will gently push down through your hips and your feet so you'll feel that stronger connection to the ground. And it will push up and out from your hips towards your shoulders, giving you the energy to move your arms. One more round. And then changing. Wild goose. Where do you feel the expansion and the contraction now? Can you still feel that sort of pushing downwards through your hips and your feet, as well as the movement upwards from your hips? And then easing forwards, parting the clouds. Sit back, and again that little push down through your hips and the expansion upwards right into your fingertips. And again, doing a round of 3 exercises. Assuming that the movement downwards into your feet and your legs is just working along quite nicely, you don't have to focus your attention on it too much. You can begin to notice what's happening between your hips and your shoulders and get a sense for the very subtle contrasts from one movement to the next. If you haven't got the movement downwards, then don't give too much attention to what's happening in the upper part of the body in the way that I said, because whatever you're feeling will end up being more strained than it needs to be. So the rooting down is the vital foundation for the rest of the changes through your body. A very telling factor here is the quality of the movement. We will all of us get glimpses of this true flow in the movement. And what we want to be able to do is to make sure that that is also something that is hardwired into our system, so that when we lose it, we register that straight away. One more round. A question occurs like, what do I do next with my arms? Try and just let that question wait and consider what you feel you should be doing with your hips and your feet. So we're going to change to Dragon Plucks the Stars from the Sky. And after this one changing, and just this one single movement, holding up the sky, feeling the lengthening through your spine. So your fingers are pointing towards each other, your elbows are out. You push up and you feel an expansion again, that space between your arms and the side of your body, also expanding and contracting. But this time, when you start to push up, as you feel that point where your elbows are just in line with the bottom of the rib cage, let them drop and notice the change. And again, we've got the expansion. It's the dropping of the elbows that encourages your hands to change direction from upwards to sideways. Now alternating the two. You may notice other things as well. I hope you do. I'm just taking a snapshot of one particular element, but there's plenty else going on in the whole of the landscape of the movement. So noticing these details, both really progresses your movement. It also means that that focusing of your attention is taken deeper and deeper into the body. So this time add in the turn. So the awareness of very subtle changes, like this one coming up is just a little movement in the hips, for instance, is actually something that aids the meditative process, helps to keep your attention within your body. This time changing to scooping the sea and looking at the sky. And then hands fisted and grasping the tiger's ears. And then switch sides. And then grasping the tiger's ears. And then come back and say. Some years ago, a good friend of mine, who sadly is no longer with us, a woman called Linda Broder. Linda was a great Tai Chi player of many years' experience, and a very good friend and mentor to me. She was a great pioneer of the adapted Tai Chi that we're doing here. I think it's probably fairly safe to say that without Linda's encouragement and leadership, we wouldn't be sitting here doing this today. So she's a very important sort of person in my Tai Chi development. But anyway, she went out to to Taiwan, not Thailand, Taiwan, and she was invited out there to work with one of the top teachers out there, which was a great honor, of course. And she went out there and she was invited into the sort of advanced students class, and the guy spent a lot of time. His students standing in posture, and remember this is Linda was watching what he was doing, and she was very experienced, and she was watching, and he'd go around and he'd take hold of a finger and he'd move it from there to there, or from there to there, or something like that. And she said at first she couldn't see the point. These were his top students, and again she knew what she was looking at. And she said, as far as she could see, they were brilliant anyway. But after sort of working with him for a short while and getting to know him, the conclusion she came to was that his reason for doing that, making these little adjustments, was nothing to do with where the finger was, because the finger was okay. It was all to do with where the mind was, and that he's going around and adjusting his students in that way was a way of bringing their attention back. It was that important at that kind of level, which I think was a very interesting sort of reflection on I suppose where our priorities should be in Tai Chi. Now, let your hands drop down again, and the wild goose. We're going to go into Wind Blows the Willows. So in the wild goose, your hands come down to a point about level with your hips, going up. It's the shoulders that they're in line with, more or less. Nobody's coming around with a ruler to test this. But now you go forwards and turn. And as you come back to the center, your hands can drop all the way down. You feel the weight of your arms here for a moment, and then forwards again. Remember, when you go forwards and turn, your weight's moving. So I'm turning this way, but my weight is going this way. Remember, when your hands come up, don't hold your arms stiff. Look at my elbows. So some of you are actually straining. I can see sort of this sort of strain in the arms. It's the expansion of your body from your hips to your shoulders that will move your arms for you. Now this time as you turn, just raise the opposite heel. So bring your knee up a little bit, come back. To start to bring your feet into the movement. Hands still no higher than shoulder height. Elbows hanging between your shoulders and your wrist. And then raising your leg. Dragonfly skims the water. Make sure the foot goes down well. If you're wondering which foot you should lift, it's the wrong question. Because if you're doing this correctly, your weight is moving more into one foot, so that only leaves you a choice of one to lift. One more time. And rest. Now just rubbing your hands together. Tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Shoulder and your arm. On the other side. Upper part of your chest. Your belly. And your legs. Good. And then stand. Just to reinforce the point that I made a few moments ago about the elbow and the arm, most of what we do, our hands don't come above shoulder height. I know there's a few movements where they do, but even when they do, the elbow should never be locked. It looked as though somebody was sort of doing this when we did Wind Blows the Willows. Look at my elbow. That's where it should be. Not here, but here. There the elbow's too extended. There it's dropping a little bit. And there are several things about that. As I've said before, I'm not a big fan of standing on one leg. I'm going to stand on one leg and show you something. I can do this. Watch what happens when I extend my arm. I fall over because the hand is too far away from the body. Going back to what I was saying earlier about these habits of movement that we have, holding your arm like this as opposed to like this may make you more likely to fall over. So there's a very practical side to what I'm talking about here, and the awareness that goes with it. It's people said they come to Tai Chi to improve their balance, and actually arguably one of the most significant things about that is going to help them is that meditational element of the art, the mind training element of the art. So now feet parallel, sinking down through your hips, let your feet drop. Now we feel that push downwards through the ground, even as you're coming up. So from the side, of course, here, you can see my hips rising and falling. But even in the act of rising, I can feel the pull downwards. It's almost like there's an elastic band from my hips down to the ground. And even though I'm coming up, there's still a pull downwards that I need to be aware of, that I want to be aware of, that's actually helping me to root down the whole time. Same thing here as we come into the Wild Goose. Another reason for keeping that soft quality in your elbows is the impact it will have on your shoulders and your wrists and your fingers. You're more likely to keep all of the joints soft when you become aware of this. And it's true also for Part in the Clouds. Although we do go higher with Part in the Clouds, look where the elbows are, look at the curve in the elbows. That helps to protect the joint and to maintain the flow of movement through your body. One more time. Shake out. It's true too when we do things like fisherman cast a net and pushing a wave. Fisherman cast a net is here. Oh, you can't really see that. So if I pull my sleeve up, you maybe see my elbow a bit better there. Can you see it's there? I see a lot of people doing this, but look, I'm already being pulled forwards. So it's here. Pushing a wave is there, not there. If you were to push, if I were to lean against this wall with my elbow locked out, immediately I can feel my elbow and my shoulder hurting. If I let it soften just a little bit, it's fine. So none of the joints in your body should ever be completely extended, except in one circumstance, really, which is if you're trying to stretch a particular muscle, then you may well have that joint extended. That's a very specific thing. At other times, they shouldn't be. So 1 foot forwards and transferring your weight. So that means that when you go forwards, we know that you're being pulled down into the ground here, but your back leg, again, yeah, you can see that, can't you? See, it's there, not there. There, not there. And just consider that and consider what it is that helps that to happen. Because it seems to me that if I'm aware of the pull of gravity working on my back hip and I'm able to yield to it, then the knee will stay soft, because the very fact that the hip is being pulled down will cause the knee to bend a little bit. Same on the front leg, of course, when you go back. So again, a very practical outcome from that quality of awareness could be that your knees are better. Shake out. And then on the other side. Fisherman cast a net. One more time. Shake out. On the other side, fisherman cast a net. And shake out. Go back to your chairs. Another very practical element, I think, a very practical outcome from this meditational aspect of Tai Chi is just the effect it has on quietening our attention, and not just quietening, but kind of ordering our minds. I'm sure you've all had times, we all have, where you kind of like, you're going out, you can't find your keys, and eventually you find your keys and you can't find your purse. And what have I done with my purse? And you're going to be late, and I'm all over the place, you say. Yeah. And actually, this quietening of the mind, this focusing of your attention, is almost like tidying your room up. You can find things again. There's a bit more space in the room. So, again, there are. When I talk about this aspect of Tai Chi and this meditational aspect, it's not in the interest of some kind of metaphysical outcome or anything like that. It's a practical day-to-day thing that Tai Chi can offer us as much and as important as any of the kind of obvious physical benefits from it. In fact, I would argue that actually the very distinction I've made between physical and mental is incorrect. It's not sensible to make that divide. Now, just let your hands drop down. So embrace tiger, return to mountain. I said at the beginning, our attention naturally goes out. I'm not suggesting for a moment we should never look outside of ourselves. But we want to really be aware of that rhythm that brings our attention back. And rest. Okay, thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Hope you enjoyed that. Do shout out if you have any questions.